I don't know how well that did go through. Probably sounded kind of lame, actually.
May your whistling chip and shatter.
Oh, wait, what?
Said, may your whistling chip and shatter.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. That was the battle call from going towards the end of the movie between Fade and Paul.
Yes, may thy blade chip and shatter. I love that.
Yes. um, Hello, what's up, everybody? I'm Darkon. He's Loudmouth.
Hello, everyone. I'm some loudmouth on the internet with an opinion who has read Dune and saw Dune Part 2.
Yes, and we have a lot to say about it, particularly Loudmouth. You know what? Never mind. I'm just gonna give up on OBS streaming on my end because that's not working out. Um, I liked it a lot. I don't know if I like it quite as much as I did Part One. It might just have been because that the experience was more fresh for me going in watching Part One as opposed to Part Two. But it was still a pretty good movie. Um, I don't know. Do you want to start mentioning cons, or should I mention some cons that I found in it first?
I just wanted to say, on a movie on its own, I overall really liked it. I mean, but I kind of feel I would have enjoyed this movie more if I had not read the book.
Right. It's kind of a similar thing with Lord of the Rings fans, particularly those who have read the original book before the Peter Jackson trilogy ever came out.
Well, I don't want to say that like every single change is a mark against the movie because I realize there are some changes that often need to be made. For example, in Dune Part One, the way Liet Kynes dies is very different in the movie than it is in the book. But honestly, it was a very smart change to make. In the book, he's basically sent out into the desert, and while he's kind of thirsting out in the desert without a still, so he kind of goes through a long chapter long internal monologue, kind of pondering the nature of Arrakis before he like hits basically a pit of spice that blows him up. And the thing is, though, it worked well in the book, but it would not have worked in the movie. And I know that because the miniseries tried to adapt it and more faithfully, and it kind of was unintentionally funny. Because
Unintentionally
without
funny.
the
At first, I thought
internal,
you were going to say it was boring as fuck.
well, it's just without the internal monologue, which really doesn't work in a movie form. It can't. The scene really doesn't work. So changing the death is something more dramatic, where kind of the gender bent kind calls a sandworm, but then is killed by Sardaukar before it could get
Shai
there.
Halud.
Shai, and I like that line. I only have one master, and his name's Shai Halud. And then the sandworm swallows all of them. That actually was may not have been different from the book, but it's a much more cinematic death that worked much better in the form of a movie.
Right. It's like how I like some of the dialogue, some of the dialogue lines for the Fellowship of the Ring and the Jackson movie changed up the order of them as compared to the book. That just better paced the movie overall.
Yeah, like let's be honest. If they had like stopped and hung out with Tom Bombadil for a while, it would have dragged the movie to a crawl.
And that too. Although one has to wonder if in Fellowship of the Ring they could have still incorporated the idea of Frodo hanging out in Hobbiton with the ring for a few decades as opposed to a few months in the movie, like it happens in the book. But
Yeah,
back on to Dune,
well,
though.
the lack of the 17-year age gap in that actually does kind of create some plot holes later in the movie because like the characters being like dramatically aged at the end, implying that without the ring they like age at hyper speed to compensate. You're kind of left with a plot hole there. Yeah. Well, why didn't that happen to Gollum? Wouldn't Gollum be dead by now then?
Oh yeah.
Well,
Oh, okay. So I guess in the book they were trying to portray it that that Bilbo was ultimately on his deathbed because of not having the ring for 30 years.
17 years.
It says 17 years. My bad. Um, and that was the biggest reason why he was allowed to go into the Undying Lands because of his age. Whereas if they did not have the aging process like sped up in the way that they shown in the movie, he would have like still been just slightly too young to have been taken into the Undying Lands or something.
Right. That's the thing when you change one thing, and I guess it was an understandable change. The Ralph Bakshi version actually is faithful to that aspect of the book, though. The 1978 animated movie does mention the whole 17 years.
Yeah.
But
Definitely does not show anything that implies that it was only a few months. I don't think it showed anything about Bilbo's party, actually, now that I think about it.
No, Bilbo's party was in that, but it like opens just at that line. I like half of you, half as much as you deserve, and then it pretty much also opens there. And without the context or anything leading up to it, it was kind of jarring. But I'm not going to say Bashki's version was that good, or it certainly is not better than the Jackson version. But there were definitely a few things in it that followed the book closer than Jackson did. Just kind of in a similar way that overall. Denis Villeneuve's Dune follows the book a lot closer than David Lynch's movie does, but Lynch was more faithful in a couple areas here and there.
Right. And so I guess going through some of those cons to go back to Dune, what are some of those changes that Denis Villeneuve did that did kind of tick you off just a bit?
Well, by far the change that upset me the most and did borderline ruin the ending for me was how Chani reacts to her new role as concubine. I in the
Oh,
book in the book at the very end of just as in the movie, he basically takes Princess Ireland as his bride to kind of like stop a war, and so that the other houses would accept his claim. It was kind of a political marriage,
right.
eh, which made
I thought there was a line of dialogue of where that they did not accept his rule though, so therefore war is already going to happen though.
which kind of almost makes the marriage to Ireland entirely pointless. That's another kind of area they kind of fucked up on. But those are the well, the war still does happen anyway, but it's massively like truculated. It isn't like it happens only in a few minutes. But what are they going to say?
Or they weren't able to like show as much of it because it would just drag the movie on a little bit too long.
Well, it mostly just ended implying that it was coming, and it mostly all happens between the events of Dune and Dune Messiah. It's not really something that like Frank Herbert ever really went into. It just mentions in Dune Messiah that 72 billion people died as a result of Paul's jihad that he inadvertently started.
Right. And I'm going to guess that it wasn't just the Fremen that were carrying it out. It was some other houses that joined his side to fight against the disloyal houses.
Yeah, it was basically a long, like a complex political situation that the movie that the last 10 minutes of the movie ridiculously tried to oversimplify. But not even that's my biggest problem. It's the fact that well, the book ends with a line that compares kind of Chani's position, and Lady Jessica kind of talks her over, and essentially she takes on the same position with Paul that the Lady Jessica had with his father Leto, where neither were ever married to the Duke or the King, but but they were the royal concubine. But essentially, they were the ones who the Duke truly loved, and thus history would remember us as their real wives, and that's kind of the last line that ends the book. That it was kind
The last book of the first book.
the first book. Yeah, that's the line
Okay.
that ends the book. It says he points to Ireland, says although Ireland may be maybe Paul's wife, she'll never really know any love from her husband because the true love will be Chani, and thus history will remember us as wives.
That's one thing that I thought I remembered a little bit better was that Chani was either apathetic at worst, if not accepting at best, of this sort of polygamous relationship that Paul was engaging between both her
she
and
accepts
Irulan.
it. In the book, she accepts it with grace and dignity. In the movie, the way she just storms out there like a childish bitch, and then and just
Well,
does a Cartman. Screw you guys! I'm going into the desert.
to her credit, well, I don't know if it's such a childish bitchiness. Like honestly, who else would? Um, I think the movie was trying to reflect real life a little bit too much in that aspect because real life, a woman would feel cheated on if a man was suddenly to try and like take up another wife for the sake of political gain. Whereas,
Well,
yeah, the book character Chani would not be a reflection of real life women.
I mean, Chani in the book didn't like the situation, but but she understood the political ramifications of why it was what she had to accept. It was basic because here's the thing: Frank Herbert's Dune, although it's set far in the future, is set in a very medieval-esque world, and kind of throughout the medieval world, oftentimes noble houses would have marriages basically more as political unions as a way of securing an alliance through marriage. In that was the way of the world throughout the vast majority of human history. Yeah, today's modern woke world doesn't see it doesn't understand that, and but that was the way of things throughout history. And Frank Herbert, I guess, being kind of the cynic that he was, assumed that eventually man would really fall back into that state throughout most of its future, which is exactly how it was in Dune.
Being
And,
the cynic that he was, that reminds me of Pilgrim's Pass video comparing both Dune and Star Trek to each other.
right.
You seen that video? You know which video I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
I think I remember. I saw that a while ago. Yeah.
Pilgrim's Pass is a great YouTuber, a great essayist, in my opinion, talking
Right.
about sci-fi and all these different thought-provoking lenses. But yeah, definitely a good breakdown on that little fault in the movie, and I definitely understand. And actually, in 100% agreement now that you say it to me. I guess it's something that I never realized at first when I watched the movie. But yeah.
So I did not like what the ending, though it does imply it has Paul look into the future and say she'll eventually get over it. So implying that she's kind of pouting and throwing a tantrum, but eventually she's going to come back. So the square
Yeah.
one, but
Probably
still,
a bit of 180 in attitudes by the time of Messiah.
yeah. But I still think that was a wrong direction. I really wish they had just played it up like they did in the book with Lady Jessica consoling Chani and explaining her new role and why she should accept it. And that would have been a far better. The miniseries
Yeah. You know,
ends with that exact line reading from the end of the book,
that
and
actually would have
that's
been.
another thing. There essentially are three adaptations of Dune because I consider both the Villeneuve movies essentially two parts of one movie, and between the David Lynch version of '84, the miniseries from the year 2000, and now the Denis Villeneuve. If you just compare it to book accuracy as your only metric, the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries from the year 2000 is definitely more faithful than Denis Villeneuve's version.
Wow. Speaking of book accuracy, isn't there like a different way that Baron Harkonnen dies, or was he really killed by Paul's hands?
That's another massive change this movie makes to the book.
Yeah,
It
you know what? In fact, if I may say something, like Quinn's ideas, I remember that in his video summation of all the books, he was saying that it's pretty much a big fat mystery on whether or not that Baron Harkonnen is like at all related to like the Atreides, Paul and Jessica, and eventually Aaliyah,
no,
like, and
no, the
yet they
book is very
reveal
clear
that
that
early.
that the Baron is Paul's grandfather. The book's
So
very
so
clear.
wait, so they did know it ahead of time?
Oh yeah, they knew that part's accurate to the book, but
Oops.
another massive change is with Aaliyah and the timeline. This movie
Yeah.
dramatically condenses its events. They seemingly take place over like 7-8 months in this movie. In the book, the events of this movie would take place over about 4 years. So
Yeah.
Aaliyah was born and was a toddler by the end of it, and also
That's
Chani and
definitely a
Paul had a son, an infant son who dies during a Harkonnen raid. He's killed by the beast Rabat.
oh.
Uh,
Oh shit! You know what? That would have actually like made the movie a whole lot more compelling. Now you mentioned that, I kind of wish that they kept that in there. Actually,
yeah, and Whereas
I mean,
Aaliyah's
it would have like taken what, a 30 extra minutes of a runtime. I mean, what's the big deal there?
Whereas Aaliyah is captured and kind of taken before both the Baron and the Emperor after the raid, and they kind of slowly figure out from her that she's Paul's sister and that Paul's still alive, which is another change the movie made when he basically makes the Emperor into kind of an idiot in the movie, because in the book he did not know that Paul was still alive. He assumed Wadi was just some nobody rabble rouser when he comes to Arrakis to talk to the Baron. And what it said, and he finds that out actually from Aaliyah, and Aaliyah, the 3-year-old toddler who, keep in mind, has the mind of a grown adult thanks to the water of life.
Yeah,
she's the one who kills the Baron, and that is important because given what a disgusting pedophile fuck the Baron Harkonnen was, it is very poetic justice that he's killed by a child he tried to violate.
yeah. Another thing of catharsis that would have been nice to have included in there. Although I will say, like going towards the beginning of this movie, when we hear like behind the doors in like the chambers of the Harkonnen palace, we just hear a whole bunch of blood curdling screeching in the room, right before Raban enters the room, and it's like the Baron like abusing these two people. Were those like? Those almost looked like preteens. That almost seemed like an implication to me, anyways, that the movie did include some pedophilic undertones of the Baron.
Well, as much as they could and earn a PG-13 rating. Well, I mean, probably if they had gone further into that, it definitely would have pushed the movie into R-rated territory.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can say officially, Hollywood movie included that. Kinda.
It did, but also it did. It kinda did, but at the same time, it removes the whole poetic justice to that. The last child who he who he didn't know at the time was his granddaughter. He actually didn't know that. Who he tries to touch, stabs him with the Gum Jabbar poison dart, and he dies there. And that's actually an area Lynch's movie is more faithful to the book than this movie is, because that's how he dies there, though that movie screwed it up by, instead of him just dying after being stabbed, in Lynch's movie, he for some reason goes up in the air, twirls through the air a dozen times, then flies out the window into the mouth of a sandworm. Needless to say, that does not happen in the book, because that was ridiculous.
Yeah, would have definitely been great to have seen that unfold. Aaliyah was born; she was like 2-3 years old, but adult mind stabs the Baron, and the Baron just like dies. Freaking like the one kid brat Emperor from Game of Thrones does.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. What was it? The most faithful version of those events come from the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, which does faithfully adapt that scene.
I got the first episode of that Sci-Fi miniseries saved in my watch later list. I ought to like sit down and watch it fully sometime. Maybe they got the whole series on YouTube, for that matter. I don't know.
I believe so, but there are some. It's not more faithful to the book in every aspect. For example, Lady Margot, for example, in her scene with Feyd-Rautha is definitely closer to the book than for the miniseries made the decision they wanted to expand Irulan's role, so they gave that a few things that Lady Margot did in the book to Irulan. So in that aspect, the novel's version is actually closer to the book than the miniseries is, and definitely Duncan Idaho's death was a lot closer to the book than the miniseries was. He didn't just get blown up by a missile. No, Duncan Idaho had the manliest death possible. He single-handedly holds up an entire squadron of Sardaukar.
Yeah,
I was so happy we finally got a faithful version of that on screen in the previous movie.
Right. Yeah. Another few good things. I do not know if you saw my unscripted review of it on my secondary channel that I linked and shared around. but one thing that I pointed out and really liked is of how that this movie continues to shine with the special effects, not just in regards of the scenery but of course the worms as well. And there's like the one part of when that Paul is trying to ride a sandworm for the first time. That looks so I do not know if it was like actual sand being like a splash against him or not against Timothy Chalamet for the sake of making the scene, but that just looked so immersive and real. Like I felt the intensity of that moment. Like,
Oh yeah, the worms were really well done. In fact, I love the scene with the worms, like all those three worms coming out of the storm and surprising those Sardaukar who were like, "Oh, what the fuck." That scene it was great. It's directly lifted out of some famous sci-fi art that was made right after the book was published. Frank Herbert always saw this art. I'm like, this is like perfect vision. Yeah, they took that art and they basically brought it to life on screen, and that was awesome.
also, the one panning shot when we're just looking overhead as the Emperor's ship is coming into land. That was a pretty cool, good shot, especially taking into effect as to how that they made a reflection shot off the ship at the same time. So, yeah, not only did you have to create the special effects for the ship itself in the air, but also the special effects for the sake of the reflection off of the ship. That was cool, and the special effects for the shields, like there's the one Thopter that is like guarding the Harkonnen harvester, and Chani shoots a rocket at the Thopter, and the rocket is just struggling to get through the shield. Those types of special effects really continue to shine. Like I don't think there is like any other sci-fi movie or series that has done anything like that. That Denis Villeneuve and his creative team have done for the special effects of a projectile trying to like cut through shields like that, because typically you would have something like Star Trek or Star Wars of where that the projectile would just blow up like on the surface of the shield, and maybe it would dilute the shields a little bit, like, oh, shields are now down to 78%, as Star Trek would say. But no, in this it's like the projectile is still going. It's like got like halfway through the shields, and then it gets fully through and blows up the Thopter, for example. Same way with the slow bombs for the back in part one of when that the Harkonnens like ambush the Atreides. That's always pretty cool. I just liked all the weaponry, the way that the weaponry was displayed in this movie. Speaking of disloyalties and weaponry, actually, I noticed that they started using rifles and just guns in general a little bit more often in this one than in part one. Was that another disloyalty for this movie?
I mean, they did use projectile weapons. They just sometimes, but and because I guess it would work with the Fremen because the Fremen didn't use shields because they attracted sandworms. But generally, like projectile weapons were a lot less effective in the Dune universe because of shield technology. If you like hits, they were designed to like repel like fast moving weapons. So like the most efficient way to kill somebody in the Dune universe is just get up and stab them.
Yeah, and
So
I guess I was like watching that first scene of where that there was like a Harkonnen squadron that was lifted down from the Thopter or whatever from the transport to search around for Fremen and whatnot, and if Fremen like going to try ambush on them. I noticed that they had their shields down, and I was wondering at first why don't they have their shields up, and then I realized and remembered, oh, it's probably because of the vibrations that would attract the sandworms. That's why. Duh.
right. And another thing that the change that irked me in both parts, their decision to gender bend Liet Kynes, and the second movie makes no mention of any relation of Kynes to Chani, and I thought that was missing something because one of the things that bonded Paul to Chani in the book was the fact that both of them lost their father in the same event. The Harkonnen When the Harkonnens came and retook Arrakis, both Paul and Chani lost their father.
You know what? Yeah, that would have definitely made the relationship more compelling as well. There's like a whole lot of sad choices made by Denis Villeneuve. Actually, man, I might actually downgrade my rating for this movie. I thought of it as an 8 out of 10, but considering that there's all these screw ups that Denny has done, like gender bending Liet Kynes, not even mentioning any relationship of Liet Kynes to Shawnee, and not to mention making it so that they don't have a firstborn son that is killed by Raban at all. Just like really dilutes the compelling nature of their relationship and of Paul wanting Beast Raban and the Harkonnens in general to die. Yeah, just like
Well,
yeah.
plus a lot of the backstory of how things work in the Dune universe is never really explained all that well in these movies. I understand it all because I've read the book, but if somebody watches this and has not read it, how will they know a lot of things? Like, what was the Butlerian Jihad? Why are there no computers? What the hell is a
Yeah.
Mentat, for example? All
I
right,
mean,
how does the Spacing Guild function?
Funny that you mentioned the Space and Guild. I was almost thinking that we were gonna like see a little bit, few more snippets of the Space and Guild. Like maybe we have a full on like evolved Space and Guild member that's like in a giant aquarium tank or something like that.
Yeah,
Did they show something like that in David Lynch's movie?
well, yeah, but that wasn't faithful either. The guild navigator really doesn't like show up or described until Dune Messiah. That's not really like seen. The Dune
Okay, never
in the
mind.
first one, the guild is just kind of seen as this mysterious organization that exists. But here's the thing: at the end, they held a role in it all, and that's kind of a big twist at the end of the book that is completely missing from this movie. Mostly, the
Yeah.
end kind of forgets the Space and Guild even existed when they're very important.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
literally have a monopoly on space travel, and they endorse Paul's claim with where he threatens to destroy all the spice because everything that they control relies on the spice melange.
Yeah.
It,
A lot of this stuff, rewinding a few minutes back, when you mentioned that there's a whole lot of information not really revealed. I guess the thing that Denny and the rest of the team is afraid of is like just giant exposition dump that would slow down the pacing of the movie and everything like that, and would be considered like a con on the part of the movie because there's a rule in Hollywood that you should like show not tell, whereas that would be a whole lot of telling and not a whole lot of showing. So
well,
yeah.
that could possibly be solved if these two movies got an extended cut. I'm hoping there's an extended cut that eventually comes out that mentions all this shit, includes a lot of bits from the book that were probably shot, a lot of them at least, that were left out of these movies. That could fix some of that.
Yeah. Um Honestly, I always liked the casting of the movies, like Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, Leto Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac, yada yada. Uh, but one casting that and of course I mentioned in my video that I really don't care for Dave Bautista. I thought that he was the weakest point in the acting department in
Yeah, I
part
agree with you
one.
100%.
He
Dave
continues
Bautista,
to be the weakest part in part two. But honestly, I have to say
I cannot stand Dave Bautista. I think he's a shit actor and a shittier person. So yeah, his involvement in these movies kind of lowers them for me.
But the thing that really kind of bugs me as well is Christopher Walken as the Emperor. I don't know how I feel about that casting.
I was yeah, I will also agree. Walken's a very good actor. I think he was too old for this part. I'm kind of baffled why they would cast an actor over 80 to play this part because the Emperor in the book, he was in his 70s, but thanks to the spice, he probably would look much younger than he was. So it would have made sense to have an actor more in his 50s play the part.
Yeah.
So Christopher Walken would have been good for the part if this movie was made 20 years ago. Uh, he he didn't have like, you don't get the sense of the Emperor's decadence, he just
Yeah.
kind of seems like a very frail old man who almost seems pitiable.
Yeah. That's another thing, actually. Um, and Critical Drinker in his review, he mentioned as to how that the Harkonnens were not portrayed to be as much of the very cunning, smart, and unstoppable force as they kind of were in part one. And I have to say that one point that really emphasizes his point a whole lot is of when going towards the end that you have one of the Emperor Sardaukar like just to cut the life support system of the Baron, and it just completely cripples him and like takes him almost out of the act completely of the movie. Like That really like made the Baron look more pathetic, honestly.
Well, that actually what he failed. The Baron was morbidly obese and thus was not capable of really moving around on his own because of that. But
Right. It's just did they well, obviously he was killed by Aaliyah, not by Paul, but was there a point at the end of like book 1 of where that his life support system was cut by a starter car?
no, that doesn't happen. But I'd say a much better example of that is kind of the change in why he sends Fade Rotha to Arrakis. Remember in the first movie when he tells Raban, squeeze them, squeeze the people. Here it implies that he just sends Fade to Arrakis because he doesn't think Raban was doing a good job. But that's not really. But his plan was actually a lot more devious and cunning than that. His plan in the book, he actually told Raban to be as brutal as possible because he wanted the people of Arrakis to hate Raban. But thus when he later would send Fade, handsome, charming Fade as a replacement for the beast Raban, they'd see Fade as some kind of like savior, and the people would love him. So,
Oh, damn. That's another layer of smartness that Denny could have included, but he
but he
did not.
did. Yeah.
And you know, I think Dune Part 2 might have been convinced to me to be more of a 7 out of 10 than an 8 out of 10. Just getting all this context here, like, damn, bro. Damn. Missed potential.
Yeah, I feel like this movie, it missed potential. I realize Dune is tough to adapt. Though I did kind of like the change of the Lady Jessica. Lady Jessica is a lot more of an active role in making the prophecy come about than she does in the book. And actually, I don't mind that change at all because that does kind of like really help communicate to the audience the way the Bene Gesserit operate.
Fair point.
The way they're kind of they manipulated the religious traditions of the Firmin for generations, kind of both because they knew prophecies tend to be self-fulfilling and because they intended to eventually make it happen.
Yeah,
it fits to Frank Herbert's kind of commentary on religion. Like the movie is very much anti charismatic religious figures. You can almost see Paul as kind of like a critique on like the Prophet Muhammad of Islam, kind of.
Yeah. You know what? Speaking of religious figures and all that stuff, you're not going to believe one of the stupidest Facebook comments that I'd ever seen underneath the Facebook reel that was just innocently, you know, kind of poking fun at Dune just a little bit. So it was kind of funny, the reel was, but the comment here is just taking it way too seriously. It says, Dune is about the Antichrist going to war against God in the last days.
Huh?
There's a commenter underneath this Facebook reel. I screen capped it where the guys are like, Dune is about the Antichrist going to war against God in the last days.
No.
Completely fundamental misunderstanding of the Dune lore and even the movie for that matter. Like, I did not get whole like Antichrist rising up against God vibes when I watched the movie, even if Denis Villeneuve was trying to like you know, twist the lore into that sort of framing, but it wasn't.
Well, I thought at the very least Denis Villeneuve did understand Dune's overarching message much better than David Lynch did. Much better.
Yeah.
David Lynch really did not understand. So the main reason why I would regard Dune 84 as a total failure is because he frankly did not seem to understand what Frank Miller was trying to say with the overarching narrative.
Frank Miller? You mean Frank Herbert?
Huh?
You said Frank Miller.
What did I? Oh shit, Frank Herbert.
It's all good, but yeah, I guess you know what, you're right. David Lynch was trying to from what I vaguely remember of watching that movie last anyways, I guess David Lynch really was trying to portray Paul Atreides as an actual hero, whereas
an actual Messiah and a rain-making god at the end. He literally like magically summons rain at the end for some reason, which I don't know how you even adapt Dune Messiah after that.
Forget about portraying Paul as a hero. That is an even worse disloyalty. But whereas this movie, Denis Villeneuve, he did portray Paul as kind of dangerous and intimidating in almost a sinister kind of way. Not
Yeah.
intimidating in a big badass hero about to swoop in to save the day or whatever, but just a jaded figure that maybe at first might be okay, morally speaking, but you can definitely see the seeds being planted of a totalitarian dictator.
Oh yeah.
And it really delivered on that. And another pro about this movie is that it really sold on how much of an imposing, intimidating figure that Paul Atreides is supposed to be. Between both these two movies, we saw him go from innocent, almost college kid kind of character to go into to be almost like a maybe not so much a Hitler level kind of well, just a charismatic, intimidating figure with help of mastering the voice to make him look even more imposing. Like the books, Quinn's idea is a summation of them, what I'm basing off of. Again, he always goes saying that the voice is supposed to make somebody just a naturally and almost magically kind of imposing figure that you don't really want to like argue against them. Like at all. Otherwise, you'll have your bones cracking just by them speaking at you, even mildly at all. Whereas this movie really delivered on. Honestly, with him like explaining the books, I never really got it. Like, I never really got the true brevity of that being explained to me. It's just like he said it, and it was like, okay. But this movie actually translated that for me to actually feel the brevity of Paul mastering the voice and the way that he is becoming what he's becoming.
Yeah.
I don't know if that all made sense.
No, I thought so too. I kind of do like that he tries to resist his coming destiny throughout that because he knows what it will lead to, but eventually, kind of just he kind of embraces it, and he goes for the throne.
Yep.
He wins the throne, and then he starts a holy war that kills 62 billion people.
Right. Terrible.
So Paul is not the Messiah. He is a very naughty boy.
Yep. And speaking of messiahs and all that stuff, in regards of the commentary, the thing that makes it extra stupid is that the emperor is not even supposed to be an allegory for any kind of Christian leader. I mean, aside from the fact that they, for some reason, changed up his garb, like he went from like almost admiral-looking uniform, like I vaguely remember him wearing in the David Lynch movie, to him like almost having pope robes. But that's about it. As far as I remember, and as far as what I thought that the movie was portraying him as, he's pretty much a secular like emperor of the entire empire, right?
Yeah, but keep in mind he's the 81st emperor in this dynasty. So like his ancestors have kind of held power for thousands of years.
Wait, 81st dynasty?
81st in the dynasty, 81st emperor in this dynasty.
Oh, in this dynasty. So a dynasty could like last hundreds of years.
Over 10,000 years, pretty much since the end of the Butlerian Jihad. His family house Carino is kind of ruled.
What was like the longest living emperor according to the lore?
I don't remember that.
Would it be something like 200 years old, 150?
I forget. I don't remember if that's ever said.
Okay, because obviously you already said that the emperor was supposed to actually have like a little bit longer longevity because him taking spice like slows down his aging process a bit.
Well, not just the emperor, but people across the Dune universe. That's why spice was so valuable.
Right. Yeah. What's some other good things to say about this movie? I liked some of the action sequences by themselves, anyways. Although I did see that Shadiversity, that's the name of it. Shadiversity, I saw a video just passed by it. I did not actually watch it, where that he says the problem with the Dune combat, with combat in Dune. I have to like check out that and see what he thinks that there is some problems. What is the problems with the action? Like, I do got to say that it was kind of cool to watch of how that you have a whole bunch of Fremen that would just like go up, roll up to a Harkonnen soldier, like trip him and then stab them, kind of ground pounding motion kind of way like that.
Yeah, which is accurate to the book. The Fremen would like use the desert. That's what made them so deadly. They would hide and knew the ways of the desert. So, and the Harkonnens, of course, just even though they had far air superiority, they just didn't understand the desert nearly to the extent the Fremen did.
Yeah. Um, but at the same time, I was thinking to myself in my head, like, how practical is that exactly? I did not go thinking about it too much, but maybe Shadiversity did because he really likes to um, nitpick action sequences to an almost excruciating level. If you ever saw his fight autopsies, he did like a fight autopsy of many sword battles from The Last Jedi to Revenge of the Sith and so many more. Um,
I also
and do,
thought it spent too much time. It also created a weird division where like northern Fremen tribes looked down on southern Fremen tribes because they viewed them as more fanatical, which is not in the book. And I'm kind of like, huh?
I did kind of go wondering about that, but then again, I did not know much about the lore, and I don't think Quinn's ideas like really focused on that stuff as much in his summation. So I was all like, eh, whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and it
I,
kind of did. It added weird shit that wasn't in the book, but didn't like go. I kind of wish it had gone more into like all the ways the Fremen try to save water, and a lot of text in the book is devoted to the rather extreme ways that they have to like save water in order to survive on this planet where there's very little of it.
yeah. Um,
And you see people
whereas,
out in the desert without their still student mask on too often. Probably because Hollywood feels the need. Well, we got to show our actors' faces, dude. But that'd be a good way of dying of thirst because every time you exhale, you excrete water. The whole point of a still suit is it's meant to keep your body's moisture in so that you can survive without water in the deep desert for way longer. If you going out there without a still suit, you won't last long on Arrakis because humans, of course, need water.
gotcha. Yeah, the movie did like make mentions like you would have Stilgar like consistently enforcing those traditions of save your water, and like Jessica like starts crying a little tear, and he's all like,
Never give
"Do not
water
shed
to
water for the dead."
never give water to the dead. The crying is taboo among the Fremen. You
But
cannot
the
give water to the dead.
but like you said, the books did like actually say that they were supposed to be even more extreme than Stilgar was shown in the movie when it comes to like water preservation, right?
Oh yeah, it underplayed it. They were like wasting water among the Fremen is like considered like a massive taboo.
Yeah. I guess the movie was trying to like portray the Fremen as more noble than they actually were,
Uh,
just in a
I
way.
guess. Well, it's just that's their way. These people have lived on this planet for thousands of years, so if they weren't like proficient at saving every drop of water, they would not last long on this planet.
Yeah. I did kind of want to mention more about the action sequences. I did think that the action sequences were cool overall, like the fight that the Fremen had with the Harkonnens, especially the Harkonnen Thopter over the Harvester. But the end battle, when it was like two armies against each other, that seemed to almost came and went like a little bit too quickly and too abruptly. But what
Kinda,
was
yeah,
even more abrupt and anticlimactic was Gurney's fight against Raban. I don't know if you agree or not.
yeah, a little bit. It came a little. It did feel a little bit robust. It felt like there was longer stuff in the original shooting, but some of it got cut out because like your movie's running long, man. That which probably is the case.
Sorry, I was distracted with
Another,
the
there's a
picture
whole
there.
plot line into with Gurney that he thinks that Lady Jessica is the one who actually betrayed the Duke Leto, and there's a scene where he tries to murder Jessica and but then is told by Paul that that Huey was the traitor, not her, and then it's all like forgiven. That whole scene is not. That whole scene was in the miniseries, is not in this movie at all.
Was it in the David Lynch movie?
No,
Hmm. I will say, personality-wise, which did you think did a better job at portraying Gurney, Patrick Stewart or Josh Brolin?
that's a little bit tough. Brolin, but because he had a lot more screen time to develop his personality, Lynch's movie's so damn short that it's that Patrick Stewart really wasn't given much time to develop any kind of personality.
Yeah. I do kind of like the consoling relationship that Gurney Halleck continued to have with Paul Atreides. Like, even though Paul was kind of advancing in the ranks a bit, it was still nice to see that Paul ultimately respected one of his multiple father figures. Yeah. Um, he did not do that so much after he took the Water of Life, but that's kind of expected because, of course, the Water of Life would make Paul like get a little bit too much of a big head. So, but
Yeah, it essentially like gave him like almost a godlike insight of a reality. He could see like multiple possibilities. He gave him mental awareness that no human could ever possess without it. It's essentially the water of life is essentially a super concentrated version of the spice melange.
yeah.
It's so concentrated that it most likely would kill you, but if you're able to survive it, you'll gain a supreme mental awareness.
Yeah.
For some
By the
reason,
way,
women are much more likely to survive, but Paul was able to be the exception to that.
yeah. Um, Goes to show that transgenderism would not work within the Dune universe,
Yeah, so imagine if
according to the
somebody,
lore.
yeah, imagine if a friend was like, "Well, I identify as a woman, therefore I'll drink this shit," and then he's just dead.
Yep.
Well, are you telling me that the sandworms don't respect my gender identity? Yes. Plus, all sandworms are hermaphrodites, so they don't give a shit about your gender identity.
Yeah. Um, I will say, the movie was kind of a little bit confusing to me as far as like the storyline. Because I don't know. I think I can possibly pick up on why that the Benny Gesserit ultimately thought that um Fade Ratha, if he became Baron and then ultimately Emperor, that he would have been easier to control than Paul Atreides. But they kind of almost rushed through it over it, not really addressing it
Well,
in
it kind
full.
of mentioned the original plan. Jessica was supposed to give birth to a daughter, and that
Yeah,
daughter was supposed to marry Fade Ratha, and then their son would be the Kwisatz Haderach. But Jessica, by having a son instead of a daughter, kind of fucked up their plans.
yeah.
That that
Um,
that's kind of how it works.
what would they have done with the Kwisatz Haderach? Would the Kwisatz Haderach have gone on to eventually take the throne, and the Benny Gesserit would be able to control that Kwisatz Haderach better than they did the Emperor Shaddam the Fourth?
Yeah, that's kind of their hope that the Kwisatz Haderach was kind of their like ultimate Superman, who they planned to have take the throne and like manage the galaxy better than anyone ever could.
Yeah, gotcha. Another aspect of how that transgenderism would not fit in the Dune universe.
Yeah,
um, I want to cancel Frank Herbert for daring to not be inclusive enough.
right. I mean,
Whee!
he does have a predominant gay character in his story, but he does make that predominant gay character a sadistic pedophilic psychopath.
Oh, it was supposed to be the Baron.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah. The
okay.
Baron was definitely very gay, but not a positive character.
Oh boy. Um, Funny because Pilgrim's Pass like says that he like whatever the name of the creator of Star Trek was Gene Roddenberry, was that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gene Roddenberry. That Frank Herbert, like Gene Roddenberry, people, men of their times, they were both like progressive, fairly progressive, especially leftist progressive for their time. Except Frank Herbert was a little bit more pessimistic about the future as opposed to Gene Roddenberry. But it kind of makes one wonder: was that an exception to his beliefs? Frank Herbert, was he actually like against gay marriage or something?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think the fact that I don't think the fact that he made a gay man a villain is evidence of homophobia any more than having a straight character as a villain is. Because
Oh,
we
I don't
look at straight people.
I don't think so either. I'm not trying to read too much into that aspect of everything, but it just made me wonder for a split second there. What's some other good or bad things that we can mention about this movie?
Um, what do you think of Austin Butler as Fade Rotha?
Oh yeah, that guy, he did a phenomenal job. Definitely better than Dave Bautista, but I would say that he probably did even better than Stellan Skarsgård as the Baron. I mean, even Stellan Skarsgård even he did like a good job on his own role as the Baron, especially in the opening scene for part 2, where he's all like, "Tighten your grip on Arrakis, or fear my grip on your neck," as he like descends into the black goo vat. But Austin Butler, they made him look like definitely a douchey, like a hot shot pig, especially in the middle of the ending battle of where he kind of has a paw on the ground. He just seems to almost look at women as almost inferior more than your average men of this universe do. He points at Chani and is all like, "Is this your pet?" That guy was, pretty good job for Fade
There's
Rotha.
a whole sequence in the book that's not in the movie, but was in the miniseries where he tries to assassinate the Baron by putting a Gom Jabbar poison dart in in a child that he knew the Baron was gonna violate, so that when the Baron violated it, would poison and kill him. But the Baron discovered it, and as punishment, he doesn't kill Fade. The Baron kills a bunch of his slave women as punishment to Fade.
Wow, because Baron ultimately knew that even though he hates his nephew, he's still vital to his plans.
Yes. So,
There's a whole bunch of self-hatred within this family. Sorry, you were saying?
He's just like, well, Fade's disappointed. I'm sorry, Fade. You're going to have to accept your punishment.
Yeah.
What again really just shows just how absolutely maniacally evil these characters are.
Yeah. And the movie already did portray pretty good on how maniacally evil that these characters are. But the book, especially by the way that you're describing, it sounds like that they're even more evil than Denny was willing to show. So imagine if somebody was to like go the extra mile further than him and portray all this stuff on screen.
Then it would have definitely, like I said, you'd have to kiss that PG-13 rating goodbye. And
R rating, here we come. Yeah.
Hey, Oppenheimer made $960 million and it had an R rating.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, honestly, because last I checked of the box office rating is like 560 something million, and then the very last time that I checked, it was like over 900 million. It's like, damn, bro. I didn't realize that. I knew that Oppenheimer was doing good, but I did not realize it was doing that good.
Hey,
but good on Nolan.
I do find it hilarious that when that movie was released in the Middle East and India, they computer animated a dress onto Florence Pugh.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Florence Pugh, which character did Florence Pugh ultimately play as here?
The Princess Irulan.
Oh, right. Yeah. She was there. She was there.
It shows off a few aspects of her character that she was like trained in the Bene Gesserit. So, and it mentions she's a scholar, which is a clear part of the book. The book actually is full of quotations that came from her like scholarly histories.
Yeah.
Right.
In the check the live chat. There's like a funny comment, and then there's a question as well.
What makes someone an intellectual coward in your book? I don't know what that relates to Dune, but I guess it's a little bit cowardly that they refuse to mention the word jihad anywhere in this movie. That when that word it comes up in the book a lot. Paul's crusade is described frequently as a jihad, and of course the Butlerian jihad is entirely the reason why the Dune universe is the way that it is. So not having that mentioned, imagine people will be incredibly confused at why this far future society seems in many ways that it mastered space travel, but it's way less advanced than what we have today
You
in
know,
many ways.
that's another thing. Like, despite there being no computers used, there was like the beginning scene of when that Raban first appears in the movie, of where that they're looking in the control room with the map. Was that that almost looks like something that would require computers of some kind
Well,
to
if you
keep
notice,
track
there
of
were actually
everything?
various humans attached to it. So these people like were controlling you with their minds, not with any with any like processors. Did you notice that?
Oh, I guess I did not. So
Yeah,
they were
yeah,
using mentats to help work that map.
yeah. Yeah, the same as like the Dune navigators. They drink so much spice that they mutate into these monstrous kind of like forms.
Right. And speaking of Raban, Helicopter Cat said Dave Bautista.
Yeah. Yeah. Batista, he shouldn't be famous. You know, he's a total moron. And he's not a good actor. He's the worst actor in this movie by far.
Who would have been like a better substitute for playing the part of Raban?
I'm not sure, but I guess if you have to give Dave Batista any character, it would be the Beast Raban. Because Raban was not a very complex character. He was pretty much just a psychopathic asshole. So
Yeah.
so it didn't really require really a great actor to like kind of do good enough.
Although, what if they were to? I know that this guy is like casted in way too many movies, but what if Dwayne Johnson was to play that part?
I don't know. I don't know. That might have worked.
I mean, this movie was already trying its hardest to like acclimate all that star power. Imagine if they were to do that even more by having Dwayne the Rock Johnson as opposed to Dave Bautista. I mean, what do people know Dave Bautista for? Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. Dwayne Johnson, he's known as the Scorpion King. He's played multiple parts in all those jungle movies. He's played in Snitch. He's played in
I mean,
Fast and Furious.
I don't think he's that much better of an actor than Dave Bautista, but
No, I agree.
as a person, I generally think he's okay. Whereas Dave Bautista, I generally think is a total ass. Have you
I don't
ever
know.
read some of his Twitter account? Oh my fucking god!
I know that Dave Bautista, like, he has some real bad takes on Twitter, but at the same time, Dwayne Johnson, there's something about him. There's something scandalous about him in regards surrounding the Maui fires. I have to like look more into that.
I haven't seen heard anything like really bad about Dwayne Johnson. Whereas my god, Dave Bautista's takes on Twitter. Oh my god.
Name one of them. No, I'm legitimately asking because I haven't read any of them.
I don't even want to get into it. Just go there. He's out of his mind. That guy.
All right, I'll try to remember that later.
But
But staying on Dune Part 2 though.
yeah, that has nothing to do with the movie. But that is just kind of a thing. I just kind of have a dislike of him.
I did have one thing to mention. Like, you talked about how this movie like refrains from mentioning the word jihad, especially in kind of a negative light. It seems to be like another example of Denis Villeneuve trying way too hard, like he's feeling peer pressure to buy the modern left in society.
Oh yeah,
And he's trying
definitely.
to cater to them.
Yeah,
Like,
he's constantly pressured to include the message.
gender bending Liet Kynes was one of them that you, I, and Trucker went in length like 3 years ago, and now here he is doing it again by refraining to mention the word jihad.
And worse than that, Chani's line that here in Arrakis everybody's equal. Bullshit. You know that Stilgard had like 6 wives in the book.
Wouldn't be surprising, but they did refrain from actually showing that. It seems like for the way that the movie framed it, it almost made him look like that he was like, I don't know, a single bachelor or something.
No, he had a fucking harem.
Well, Denis Villeneuve. Loudmouth, you're just ripping Denis Villeneuve a new asshole here.
Sorry, man. I gotta call where it is, like it is.
No, it's fine, and I totally get it. And I'm not so sure of how much of the fault of Denis Villeneuve this is. Like, ultimately, it's not like the movie was harmful or anything. Even though it's not that loyal to the book as it could have been to really make this movie truly compelling, I cannot say that there's like any like really harmful messages or anything like that that was displayed in this movie, like there was none in part one as well. Like it's not like there's like any anti man messages or anti anything that of the right that the right values. Um, you know,
No, I thought the overarching message was faithful to Frank Herbert's book. So,
the only
and that ultimately is the most important thing, which is why I still overall say this is a good movie. But I was it could have been better in some spots.
yeah, it's kind of like how a critical drinker like pointed out first that there's not no females like making men look like fools, or even the movie making the man like look more relatable. Like Paul Atreides, for example, especially after he drinks the water of life, no goofy shenanigans or anything else like that.
Yeah.
So that's all well and good.
And a cult of women do kind of like control the galaxy in the Dune universe with the Bene Gesserit, or or as honest trailers referred to them, the Spice Girls.
That's funny.
Yes, yeah, their song will be, "If you want to be my lover, you got to be part of our 10,000 year pre-selected breeding programs."
Was that another line in the Honest Trailers trailer?
No, I made that one up myself.
Oh, good job, Loudmouth. That was right off the fly, huh?
Yes, but
Really
but
good job.
but that them referring to the Benny Gesserit as the Spice Girls, the honest trailers came up with that one. uh,
Yeah.
Honest trailers has always been funny. I'll never forget their one for Batman and Robin. That opening was brilliant.
You know,
In a city full of crime, one man is determined to kill Batman once and for all. His name is director Joel Schumacher.
since we're kind of on this roasting period right here, Disney, if they were to like buy the rights to the Dune property, there would be absolutely no way that they could make a movie anything like Dune. I mean, especially with the way that they want to like make it so that no women are villains at all. Like it's Frank Herbert made his book so locked tight, like interspersing on all sides with there's people of all stripes who are good and people of all stripes who are bad. There's no way that Disney could make a movie to make it so one-sided. Like, for example, they could not make it so that the Bene Gesserit are, hey, good guys after all, or make it so that the Bene Gesserit are all men, or a combination of all men and confused women, or anything else like that, because it just would not work according to the book. As much as we kind of bash on
Yeah,
Denis Villeneuve
especially
with their disloyalty, but at least that he wasn't like Disney levels
no,
or
no,
anything like
definitely,
that.
no, definitely not. If anything, the Dune universe is kind of a secret matriarchy, because like this cult of witches essentially like control everything behind the scenes. Even though they don't
Yeah.
like upfront rule the galaxy, that behind the scenes they're like manipulating everything.
Yeah. I definitely cannot wait to see future adaptations of this universe. Like, I mean, I still like the movie ultimately, even though you got me to like it a bit less. And maybe sometime in the future, I'll like go on a marathon of watching both part one and part two side by side with each other. Especially in preparation for watching Dune Messiah, if we see it in the year 2026 or something,
Maybe
2027.
by then will movies even exist anymore?
Fair point. Who knows? Maybe we'll have nuked ourselves to where that we're just restricted to watching past made movies, nothing new.
I mean, if somebody uses AI video to make a movie about the Butlerian Jihad, that'd be the most ironic thing ever.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
Yep. Oh, which might be actually why that AI. I mean, if an AI really was self-aware, they probably would never do something like this. Which, in that case, the making of future Dune movies might be safe in human hands.
Yeah.
I'd definitely be looking forward to seeing an adaptation of Children of Dune. Like listening back on Quinn's ideas, um, summations of the books, Dune Messiah sounded like one of the less, one of the more underwhelming books of the entire series. Whereas Children of Dune, I got on listening to that one day while at work, his summation
Well,
of that, and it was just really enthralling and captivating.
well,
Like,
Dune Messiah is essentially like Paul's real fall. Kind of like Dune is kind of his rise. It's basically his hero arc is basically Shakespeare's Hamlet arc. The prince destined for the throne has his father murdered by an evil relative, is sent into exile, gains power outside of exile, that goes back and retakes the throne. It's basically the Hamlet story arc.
yeah. Although at the end of the day, did Hamlet do some vengeful crusade against all the rivaling kingdoms?
Uh, no, but he does meet a tragic fate at the end. The kind of like basic arc is kind of very common. I mean, the Lion King obviously is like a very it was a straight up adaptation of Hamlet, but with talking animals, because that kind of archetype just kind of like keeps coming up over and over again.
With the sequel, Lion King 2, they did not show his fall though.
Well, Disney, of course, they're not they don't want to depress all the crotch dumplings. I mean, they did enough with killing Mufasa. Come on.
Yeah. It's kind of
Yeah,
like how
you got to
go
get
on.
up. You got to go home.
Sad.
Yeah.
Anything else?
What else about this movie? We talked about the sandworms being awesome. Let's see. Whole water of life. Him finding out that the Baron was his grandfather. That part. Which
Um,
that's an interesting dynamic that added, and it is from the book. Essentially, though, it's all we talk about. We're like showing how evil the Harkonnens obviously are, but we essentially find out our main characters are also Harkonnens.
yeah, technically
Paul
speaking.
Paul is a Harkonnen, and so is the Lady Jessica.
Which would partly explain why that Timothy is just a little bit more pale than his dad, Leto.
Right. They actually did that connection a little bit even better in the miniseries. They kind of have like the Baron and Paul kind of like rub their temples a lot with their fist, and as kind of like a weird tick both characters have. And then at the end, close to the end, revealing that the Baron's Paul's grandfather, like that's something he inherited from him.
Rub their temples like this.
Kind of, yeah.
Gotcha. Um, I guess one other thing that I want to say about this movie, part one, a little criticism that I heard from people is that it would have been nice to have seen a little bit more of civilization, like regular average civilization, like maybe a quick shot of what it's like to be a citizen under the House Atreides, like on what's the name of their home planet? Korriban?
Caladan.
Caladan, yeah, Caladan. What happened like after the Atreides like left there, and then ultimately got destroyed on Arrakis. I will say credit to this movie. It was nice that they shown just a little bit more of that. Like, for example, of how that the Harkonnen citizens, they just revel in these gladiator arenas, watching gladiators like fight off each other. Like with the one part of where that they first introduced Fade
But
Roth.
ultimately, though, these shows are just sadistic blood sport because most of the time the slaves put it in against Fade Ratha were drugged, so Fade could kill them easily. So they rarely were ever fair fights. That's why it's kind of like a scandal in the fact that this one slave wasn't drugged, so Fade wasn't genuine danger.
Yeah. It, I guess was that actually part of the book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, another criticism. Why was that scene in black and white? What the fuck?
Maybe it's because of the fact that maybe it's because he's trying to like emphasize as to how that how disgusting and depressing that Giddy Prime is.
Yeah, I don't think that scene being in black and white added anything to the movie. That was just kind of like, huh? What's going on? Did someone forget the
Maybe
color?
hmm. I would have to like it'd be interesting to know what the science of that would be to make the atmosphere and everything look almost like washed out color wise.
Hmm. Another thing I kind of didn't like was how much of this movie is in subtitles. I mean, I get English wouldn't survive that far in the future, but I think the audience is smart enough to know that it's non-diegetic English, that it's not that's not really that's translated.
Gotcha. One thing that I forgot to mention a little bit earlier when first talking about Austin Butler as a Fade Rotha, I do have to say that definitely better because definitely better than the David Lynch version of Fade Rotha. Like I,
Played by Sting, yeah, that was weird.
yeah, I saw the ending clip of where that Paul and the Fade they're like fighting each other, and then Sting is just all like, "I will kill him," just megalomaniacally, and is like, "You look like a fucking clown, dude. You don't look intimidating. You look like a clown." And just as opposed to this version, Fade Rotha is just all like, "Is this your pet?"
Yeah, he had a much more sinister edge to him, which was keeping with the character. He's kind of a described in the book as kind of like charming and handsome, but also with just this sinister edge because he's a sociopathic monster.
Yeah, I did not really get that with Sting's way of playing Fade Rotha.
Right. They did. I remember Lady Margot does seduce him in the book, but I don't think she does the whole test of the Gam Jabbar test with the box. I don't think that was there.
Hmm.
But I thought it made sense though that she would test him like that before taking his child. You don't want to take the child of someone who's not a human but who can't control their animal instinct.
Yeah.
That
I mean, ultimately, he was supposed to become, he was supposed to procreate the spawn that would become the emperor, the puppet emperor of the Bene Gesserit, controlled by the Bene Gesserit, emperor of the empire, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah, you know.
The test is simple. Remove your hand from the box and you die.
Yep.
What's in the box? Pain.
I would be looking forward to an extended version of these movies. Maybe that's when I'll like do a rewatching marathon of parts 1 and 2. Is when I
Right.
hear news of accessibility of an extended edition of both of these.
Yeah, it's actually like most of like the backstory of how this universe works is presented right after the Gam Jabbar test, but most of it's omitted from the movie. That's where you hear a lot about the Butlerian Jihad. You hear about the Mentats, all this. You see the Mentats in the first movie. No, to fear. They tell him that they get asking for a mathematical calculation, and he just instantly gives it because he's like a human computer. And you see
Yeah.
like Piper, the Baron's Mentat, very briefly, but you still ultimately don't get much from him.
Yeah. Which, by the way, speaking of which, they did not actually show Two Fear being alive here in part 2. I thought that might have been him that was who was like piloting the one ship that was going to drop off the Atreides harvester that Halleck was like in command of, but it wasn't like really clearly shown if that was Two Fear or not.
No. Well, in the novel, To Fear, there's a whole subplot that's not in the movie where he's kind of held captive by the Harkonnens. Basically, in it, after losing his Mentat, the Baron really wants a new one, and he knew that the To Fear was a really well accomplished Mentat, so he kind of like tries to get him under his control, and he keeps him in line because every day because he fed him a poison that will eventually kill him.
And they had
But
to milk a cat to cure him.
and then they would give a little like anecdote to it in food, which yeah, Lynch did that whole thing of having it come out of a cat, which was not in the book, and that's one of the weirdest things that David Lynch had in his version. Like, What's wrong with you, Lynch? What the fuck is this shit?
Uh,
Like, why are you milking a rat and a cat for this? And why you had a bunch of pug dogs everywhere? What was up with that?
I do gotta ask, like, would you say that overall the miniseries, the 2000s miniseries, is better than the Denis Villeneuve saga so far?
Well, in terms of book accuracy, yes. In terms of an overall movie, no. Um, the miniseries not only did it have severe budget constraints, but also had quite a few wanky performances and some elements that really just didn't work on screen. Denis Villeneuve's version is a lot more cinematic, had a much grander production. Overall, is the better movie. But
A lot better
even if
action.
even if the miniseries is the more faithful adaptation overall.
Would you say that ultimately Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy is more faithful than Denis Villeneuve is with being Dune so far?
That's tough, actually. That's a really tough question.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'd say Peter Jackson's would be slightly more faithful than Denis Villeneuve was with Dune, but only slightly.
Okay. I still have to
Because
like finish listening to the audiobook of Fellowship. What?
there were some definite changes that he made to the books as well.
Yeah. I will say there was this one meme that I saw a while ago on Facebook saying that every generation has their generation defining franchise. With Gen Xers, it was Star Wars. With Millennials, it was Lord of the Rings. With Gen Zers, it's going to be Dune. And then there was people in the comment section that was saying, nah, Dune is not on the same level as Star Wars or Lord of the Rings as far as generation defining. And honestly, I think I kind of agree just a little bit because Dune Dune is definitely good in of how that it's like a warning, an ode and a warning about cult of personalities and tyrannical leaders that you should be aware of them, whatnot. That is definitely an important message for people of all generations to like heed and take in. But at the same time, as a movie by itself, is it as memorable and as lovable as Star Wars and Lord of the Rings? I'd gander not. I mean, you and I like kind of argue a little bit about the Northmen, about how that I don't really like it because it does not have that likable characters. Dune is kind of a little bit like that, but not as on as high of a level as Northmen. But it still doesn't have as likable characters and memorable arcs as Lord of the Rings or Star Wars did.
Well, Dune never really, even in the book, doesn't really have that likable of characters. It kind of,
Yeah, I understand.
that was really never what Frank Herbert was going for. It's more he was more like him putting his own like political philosophies into a far future sci-fi setting. It's more about the allegories, which is
Right.
why actually Tolkien actually didn't like Dune. He actually did read Frank Herbert's Dune,
I
and he
thought I
didn't
heard
like
about
it.
that. Yeah, it's funny because go talking about comparing Roddenberry to Herbert. Let's compare Herbert to Tolkien. Tolkien was definitely a little bit more of an optimist than Herbert.
Oh yeah, yeah, I can understand why because he had much more of a sunny outlook, and he didn't really like political allegories in his stories. Like he kind of rejected that form of storytelling, whereas that's pretty much all Dune is.
Yeah, the most that Tolkien ever touched on politically was, there's a corrupt steward, that being Denethor, who refuses to like give up power.
Right.
That's it. No Senate debates within Gondor or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. And
um,
but I guess Tolkien was a little stupid. He also didn't like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, apparently, just because
oh, really?
Disney's version of dwarves kind of contradicted his own perception.
Wow, that's just come on. That's a little bit tad narcissistic. Imagine if he like lived to be longer. I mean, obviously he'd be like I don't know, 100, 120 years old or something like that. By the time that World of Warcraft came around, of where they have their own spin on orcs. Like with Tolkien's version of orcs, they are just like these weak, like cannon fodder, like slaves of evil and evil masters. Whereas in Warcraft, the orcs are a little bit more two-sided, just with a little bit more of a chest beating warrior culture to them. Like
Yeah.
they're both good orcs and bad orcs, and they're like these big hulking tanks of a beast, you know?
Yeah, because he
Almost like
actually
trolls.
requested that Disney not be allowed to adapt Lord of the Rings. Uh, but he, to be fair, he did praise the movie's kind of like artistry and art style. He actually did think it was a beautiful movie, but he didn't really like the way the dwarves were portrayed.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
he didn't completely trash it.
it's just a tad bit narcissistic, I have to say, on Tolkien's part. It's like your interpretation of these mythical creatures is not the only interpretation. As long as there's like some key elements of the mythical creatures that kept intact, I say, have at it. I mean, they're still little in Snow White, just like they're little in your lore, just like they are still little in World of Warcraft as well.
Now imagine we resurrect Tolkien from the dead so he can watch the upcoming Snow White and the Seven Dwarves remake, or watch Amazon's Rings of Power. What do you think he'll do there?
Oh man. Yep. It's Bia's worst nightmare.
It'd be like he'd be like, I was better off dead.
I do have to say, if there was nothing more that we had to say about the Dune Part 2, I do have to kind of get it going with my evening plans for this fine Saturday evening. Was there anything else we wanted to say?
I guess we can cut it here. We said a lot. There was some. Oh, I wanted to talk about the the scene where he like nukes that wall. It kind of that does happen in the book, but it kind of doesn't mention the kind of the galaxy's prohibition on use of atomic weapons. And I think that's kind of a shame, because that was an interesting thing, that atomic weapons are something that's like scarred mankind deep to its genetic core, because this is a universe that's had these weapons for over 21,000 years. So like there was something like deeply like profound that it's something nobody would tolerate. But he gets around that by saying, yeah, but I'm not using them on humans, I'm using them just on the shield wall, so I can that's a nice loophole I can use.
I guess so.
And another thing, he doesn't threaten spice production by threatening to nuke the spice as he does in the movie. He does it by finding like a place that where if he poisoned a spice, or he could start a chain reaction. And this is significant because one is him coming to like a profound understanding of the nature of the desert, and him really like understanding how Arrakis functions. And the other is saying, yeah, I'm just going to blow shit up.
Ignite all the spice.
Yeah.
Ignite the spice.
So I guess even though he threatens to do essentially the exact same thing, that kind of difference is subtle, but it does make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I have to say, if anybody goes watching this in the future, well, okay, doesn't really matter. We've gone through into so much spoiler material, so it's like a person watching all the way through this, like, do I really want to watch this? I still have to say it's worth a watch. I want to see this movie increase in box office so as to encourage Dune Messiah and then Children of Dune, even if Denis Villeneuve is not the specific director to direct Children of Dune.
I think Denis Villeneuve says he plans on making Dune Messiah and then kind of cutting it quits.
Yeah, that's what I was meaning.
Which would be fine. You know, he did good. He did pretty good on these two parts, but you know, if he wants to move on, that's cool.
Yep. More power to you.
There are other filmmakers who could do a good job.
George Lucas does not have to continue like directing Star Wars movies, and that is like the fact that George Lucas was not a director of the sequel trilogies, was the least of the sequel trilogy.
He didn't direct The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back was not directed by him.
Yeah, yeah, I knew that.
So yeah, definitely. Yeah, but if you want to call it quits and move on to your Saturday, that's fine. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.